She looked me dead in the eye, right there on the wet concrete of my shop floor, and said, "Name your price, whatever it takes to make this go away." I set down my wrench. I looked at the crack running up the side of her elevator shaft rail, the one I'd been staring at for 20 minutes. And I said, "Ma'am, there is no price for that." By morning, she'd understand why a man who charges $85 an hour just saved the lives of everyone in her building. And by morning, she'd also something I hadn't told anyone in 7 years. But I'll get to that. Let me start where it actually started. Because the crack isn't the beginning. The beginning is a decision I made a long time ago. And the price I paid for it, and the thing my daughter said to me over a bowl of cereal that I keep turning over in my head even now. My name is Mitch Callahan. I'm 43 years old. I run a one-man elevator maintenance and inspection shop out of a rented bay in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I have a state inspector's license, a Class A contractor's certification, and a truck that's been paid off for 2 years, which I mention because there was a time I didn't think I'd get there. I'm not rich. I'm not almost rich. I'm the guy who looks at his bank account on the 15th of the month and does the math twice. But I show up when I say I will, I write what I see, and I sign my name to my own work. I have one kid. Lily's 11. She lives with me full-time. Her mom, Patricia. We were never married, which in some circles still means something, and in mine just means we split up when Lily was 3 and the paperwork was simpler. Patricia moved to Columbus. Lily comes first in everything I do, and most days she's the reason I can get out of bed at 5:30 and drive to whatever building needs me. The night this happened started the way most of my nights start. I picked Lily up from her after-school program at 5:15, and she spent the whole drive home explaining to me, in the very serious way she has, that her social studies project was doomed. "The timeline keeps falling apart," she said. "I put the cards on the board, and it just looks like a mess. What's at the center of it? The civil rights movement. I have all these events, but they don't connect." "Then the events aren't your problem," I said. "Your problem's the thread. Something runs underneath all of them. A cause, a tension, a pattern. Find that first, and the events hang off it. Don't start with the cards. Start with what's pulling." She went quiet the way she does when she's actually thinking about something, instead of just waiting for me to stop talking. We had leftover pasta for dinner. She spread index cards across the kitchen table while I cleaned up. At 7:30, my neighbor Bev, retired schoolteacher, watches Lily when I get called in, came over. And my phone rang. It was Stuart, the property manager for a high-rise residential tower over on State Street called the Alderton. 12 stories, built 1987, renovation completed 2019. I'd done their last annual inspection and knew that building the way you know a car you've worked on twice. "Mitch, I need you tonight," he said. "We've got a situation with the elevator. Unit 1, the main passenger car, some kind of grinding noise. Then it stopped between floors for about 40 seconds and then moved again. The residents are spooked and the owner is here in person, and she is." He stopped. "Just come, Mitch, please." "Which elevator model?" "The Koenig 9 Series hydraulic." I didn't say anything for a second. "Mitch, I'm on my way," I said. I kissed the top of Lily's head, told her bed by 9, drove to State Street with my hands tighter on the wheel than they needed to be, because Stuart didn't know what he'd just said to me. To him, the Koenig 9 Series was a model number. To me, it was 7 years of my life. Here's what I walked into. The Alderton is owned by a woman named Renata Cross. I didn't know her name until that night. What I learned in the first 5 minutes was that she owned 11 residential properties across central Pennsylvania, that the Alderton was her flagship, that she had a buyer, a real estate investment group out of Philadelphia, coming through the building tomorrow morning for a final walkthrough before signing a deal that had taken 8 months to put together. The elevator shutting down between floors the night before the walkthrough was not, in Renata's view, an option she had chosen. Stuart met me at the lobby door. He's a decent man, Stuart. He looked like a man standing next to something hot. "She's already called 2 other companies," he said. "Both said they can have someone here tomorrow morning. She told them that's not good enough and hung up." "What did the car do exactly?" "Ground, shuttered, stopped between 2 and 3 for maybe 40 seconds, then went up to 3 and opened normally. Resident reported a burning smell for a second. Burning smell on a hydraulic unit. I didn't say what I thought about that. The elevator machine room was in the basement. It's always in the basement in a building this age. I'd been in this particular room before. Low ceiling, fluorescent light that buzzed on one end, the hydraulic power unit bolted to the floor in the corner, and the control panel on the wall beside it. Renata was already down there when I arrived. I didn't expect that. Most owners send someone. She was standing in the corner in dark slacks and a blazer that was clearly not her first outfit of the day, arms crossed watching the power unit like it had personally offended her. She looked at me when I came in, then at my truck logo on my jacket, then back at my face. "You're it?" she said. "I'm it. Stuart says you did our last inspection." I did. "And you didn't find anything." I found 4 items I wrote up in the report. 3 were corrected before I signed off. The 4th was a recommendation on the hydraulic fluid. It was due for change within 90 days. She blinked. "Was it changed?" I looked at Stuart. Stuart looked at his shoes. "Okay," Renata said, and her voice had the edge of someone who has learned not to show certain things in front of contractors. "What are we looking at?" "I don't know yet," I said. "Let me look." I suited up and started with the fluid. Pulled the dipstick and checked the reservoir. The fluid was dark, not critically dark, but darker than I'd have liked, and the level was low. Low hydraulic fluid in a unit like this means the pump is working harder, which means heat, which means wear in places that don't get inspected from the outside. I checked the filter. Then I got into the pit and looked at the cylinder, the guide rails, the safeties. I almost missed it. I was running my light along the left guide rail, the one on the service access side, and I'd already started moving past it when something caught the edge of my peripheral. A line, maybe 8 inches up from the bracket where the rail section meets the pit floor. I moved the light back. It was a crack, not a hairline, a real crack, wide enough that I could see the depth of it had some dimension, running transverse across the inside face of the rail, the face that the car's safety guide shoes bear against when the safeties deploy. I stayed very still for a moment. The safety guides are what stop the car if the hydraulic system fails and the car starts dropping. They grip the rail, and if the rail has a fracture in the loading zone, right there, then under a deployment load, the rail doesn't hold. The car doesn't stop. 12 stories of physics does what physics does. I knew that crack. Not this specific crack, not this specific building, but I knew where it was, and I knew why it was there, and I knew that the manual for the Koenig 9 series did not tell inspectors to look at that face of that rail section unless specific symptoms were present. I had spent the better part of a year, 7 years ago, arguing with people in a room that the manual was wrong about that. I came up out of the pit. Renata was watching me the way people watch a doctor's face when the doctor has just looked at the scan. "Tell me," she said. "I need another minute," I said. "Can you have everyone step out of the machine room?" She sent Stuart and the building super out. She stayed. I didn't argue. I went back down into the pit with a better light and my camera and I documented it from 4 angles, measured it, checked the opposing rail. The opposing rail was clean. When I came back up the second time, I wrote it in my field log before I said a word. I always do this. The log is contemporaneous. It has the time, it has the date, it has my license number. Once it's in the log, the universe of what is possible changes. The car cannot go back into service without my sign-off or another license inspector's sign-off, and I am not signing anything tonight except this log entry. Then I turned to Renata. "There's a fracture in the left guide rail in the pit," I said. "Transverse crack, approximately 3/8 of an inch at the widest point, on the inner bearing face. That's the surface the car's safeties engage if the hydraulic system fails." She processed that. Meaning what in plain terms? Meaning if the hydraulics give out and the emergency safety system deploys, the rail might not hold the car. The room was very quiet. "The grinding and the stall," I said. "The burning smell. That's consistent with a pump that's been running hot on low fluid for a while. If the pump seizes, the car drops. If the car drops and the safety deploys against that rail." I didn't finish that sentence because I didn't need to. Renata's face did something then. It was just a moment. Something moved behind her eyes, and then the composure came back, smooth and quick. "What I need from you," she said carefully, "is a way to make this building ready for a walkthrough at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. I have a transaction in process that is worth—" She stopped. "It is worth a great deal, to a lot of people. My staff, the building staff, contractors I've worked with for years. The deal closes, those people have security. The deal doesn't close. She stopped again. Then she looked at me with the kind of directness you only see from people who are used to getting what they want. Name your price, she said. Whatever it takes to make this go away. I set down my wrench. I looked at the crack in my field log photo on my phone screen. I looked at the number of floors in this building, 12, and I thought about the tenant in 4B who'd reported the grinding, who was probably upstairs right now assuming someone had fixed it. I thought about whoever would step into that car tomorrow morning. "Ma'am," I said, "there is no price for that." She didn't move. "I'm not asking you to falsify anything. I can have the elevator company here first thing in the morning, and they can have it repaired before." "The car is out of service as of right now," I said. "I've logged the discrepancy. No one rides this elevator until that rail is replaced and re-inspected by a licensed inspector and cleared in writing. That's not a negotiation. That's the law, and it's my license, and it's why I have a license." She stared at me. People in her position don't get told no very often. I could see the machinery of it, the calculation, whether I was a problem to manage or a fool to steamroll. "You've been here 40 minutes, she said. "I have," I said, "but I've known about that rail section for 7 years. The machine room went quiet in a different way. "What does that mean?" she said. "It means before you do anything else," I said, "I want you to make a call, not to the elevator company. Call the Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry, Elevator Safety Division. Give them the building address and the unit number and the model, Koenig 9 series, and tell them you have a suspected guide rail fracture on the safety-bearing face. And while you're on the phone," I almost stopped. Didn't. "Ask them to pull the inspection protocol history for that model. Ask them when the current visual inspection standard for the guide rail inner face was adopted." She studied me. "What will they tell me?" "Make the call," I said. "You'll hear it from them." She held my eye for a long moment, then she took out her phone. Stuart, who'd apparently drifted back to the doorway, looked at me like I'd just done something either very brave or very stupid. I wasn't sure which either. While she dialed, I did the thing they teach you in the licensing course that you hope you never have to use outside of drills. I took a lockout tag from my bag. Red, the kind that says out of service, off-forced, personal only, and I tagged the main disconnect on the power unit and logged the tag number in time. The elevator was now legally isolated. Renata Cross could own this building outright, free and clear, and that car could not move until I removed that tag or another licensed inspector came in and signed their name to a clearance. I had just nailed it to the floor with a piece of laminated cardboard. "What?" Renata was on the phone. I couldn't hear everything. I heard her give the address. I heard her say Koenig 9 series. I heard her go quiet for a while and then quieter. When she finally lowered the phone, her face had changed. Not soft, careful. The way you look at something when the label turns out to have been wrong. "They're sending an inspector," she said. "Tonight. They said a guide rail fracture on a hydraulic unit safety engagement face is a critical finding." She paused. The man I spoke to got very formal very quickly. Another pause. And then he asked me who had logged the discrepancy. I gave him your name. "I waited," he said. And she paused again in a way that told me she was being precise with the quote. "He said if Mitch Callahan logged it, it's documented right and you should be grateful he was in the building tonight." She looked at me. "Who are you exactly?" So I told her. I didn't start as an independent inspector. I started as a field tech, young, turning wrenches on elevator systems because I liked mechanical work. Liked the way a correctly adjusted hydraulic valve feels under your hand, that specific resistance. I got my tech certification at 22. Later I got my inspector's license. And for a while in between, I went into the regulatory side. I worked for 3 years as a staff engineer for a company called Ascendant Elevator Systems, which manufactured the Koenig line. Renata's expression shifted. "You made these elevators," she said. "I didn't make the whole elevator. Hundreds of people put that product together. I worked on one part of the technical documentation, the inspection and maintenance protocols that told field inspectors and contractors what to look for and where and how often. And during a product review in my 3rd year there, I ran a failure mode analysis on the 9 series guide rail system, and I didn't like what I found. This is the part I hadn't told anyone in Harrisburg. Not Stuart, not the other inspectors I traded notes with at licensing renewal seminars. They knew me as a thorough independent who caught things others missed. Nobody knew about the conference room, the guide rail inner bearing face, the surface the car's safeties grip under emergency deployment, isn't part of the standard visual inspection protocol because it sits flush against the structural wall when the car is at normal position. You can only see it properly from the pit, with the car stopped above you, with a light angled specifically at it. The protocol I inherited said, inspect guide rails for plumb, for fastener torque, for corrosion on exposed surfaces. It didn't say look at the interface. I argued that it should. My analysis showed that in hydraulic systems with a history of low fluid operation, which is common in older buildings where maintenance logs aren't rigorous, the pump runs hot. Hot fluid degrades faster. Degraded fluid means erratic pressure. Erratic pressure means microsurges. And microsurges, over years, create lateral loading on the rail system that concentrates stress at the bracket points, specifically at the joint between the lower rail section and the pit floor bracket. That's a fatigue scenario. Not a dramatic one. Not a crack that appears overnight, a crack that grows slowly over 8, 10, 12 years and would be found by any inspector who looked at the right face of the right section of rail. I wanted two things. A protocol amendment directing inspectors to examine the inner bearing face of the lower rail section. That's it. That's a paragraph in a maintenance document. It would have cost Ascendant nothing except the minor embarrassment of admitting the original protocol had a gap. I was overruled. The protocol was within the existing standard. The standard was set by a national technical committee on which Ascendant had representatives. Changing the inspection protocol would imply the current one was insufficient, and that had liability implications the legal team didn't want to open. I was 29 years old and junior enough that overruling me was simple. So you left? Renata said. I filed a formal comment, I said. In the protocol revision record, every standards body keeps those. It's how you create a paper trail when you lose an argument you believe in. I wrote out the failure mode. I named the specific location. I said the inspection interval and the current visual scope wouldn't catch fatigue cracking at the interface before it became critical. I signed it, and then yes. Eventually I left. They made it small for me, the way organizations do. Reassigned me, left me off meeting invites, gave my project work to someone else. One day I cleaned out my desk and went back to field work, which is the only thing I ever fully trusted anyway. Because in the field, the machine either works or it doesn't. There's no politics in hydraulics. I looked at the lockout tag on the disconnect. For 7 years I told myself maybe I was being dramatic, maybe the analysis was too conservative. Maybe I was the difficult one who couldn't let something go. I looked at the pit access hatch, and then Stuart called me tonight and said Koenig 9 series, and I drove over here, and I got into that pit, and I put my light on that rail section, and there it is, exactly where I said it would be. Nobody spoke for a while. The fluorescent light at the end of the room buzzed. You could have told me who you were the moment I questioned you, Renata said, instead of letting me try to buy you off. If I'd led with I wrote the protocol, trust me, I'd have just been a guy with a story, I said. The log entry doesn't care who I used to be. The state inspector who's coming tonight doesn't care. The crack is there whether I'm credible or not. I'd rather the rail speak for me. She was quiet for a moment. My father used to say something like that about materials, she said. He was a structural ironworker. She didn't explain further and I didn't ask. The state inspector arrived at 11:40. His name was Gerald Park and he came through the basement door, saw me across the machine room, and stopped. Callahan, he said. Gerald, you called this one in? Locked it at 9:52. He pulled on his gloves, took my field log photos on his tablet, and went into the pit with his own equipment. He was down there for 20 minutes. When he came up, he looked at Renata and then at me. The fracture is propagating, he said. It's not surface. I ran a dye test and it's through thickness at the leading edge, curving into the base of the section. Under a full emergency deployment load, that section fails. He set his tablet down. Ma'am, this car would not have safely stopped in a hydraulic failure event. He looked at me. I read the comment you filed at Ascendant, he said. When I did my protocol update training 2 years ago, the trainer referenced it. Said there was a field engineer in the early days of the 9 series who'd flagged this exact failure mode and the committee hadn't acted on it. He paused. I didn't know who it was. Now you do, I said. Now I do. He was quiet for a moment. I'm recommending an emergency protocol notice to the state tomorrow morning. Every licensed inspector with 9 series units in their portfolio gets notified. Inner bearing face of the lower guide rail, mandatory examination at next scheduled inspection, sooner if any hydraulic anomalies are on record. He looked at Renata. You'll have documentation for your file. The car stays down until the rail is replaced and cleared. That's not optional. Renata nodded once. She'd been standing in that corner for 2 hours and she hadn't sat down once. After Gerald left, it was just the two of us in the machine room for a minute. Stuart had gone upstairs to put out whatever fires needed putting out with residents. The building super had gone home. I was going to walk those buyers through this building tomorrow, Renata said. I was going to take them up in that elevator. She said it the way you say something when you're imagining a version of the day that didn't happen. I know, I said. I offered you money to let it fly. You did. And you said no, I did. She looked at the lockout tag. And 7 years ago you tried to stop this before it was ever a problem, and a room full of people decided it wasn't worth their time. Something like that. And then you came back to it anyway. As a one-man shop, inspecting the same equipment you helped build without telling anyone. The elevator doesn't care about my resume, I said. Neither does the crack. She made a sound that might have been a laugh in other circumstances. You know the deal is probably going to fall apart, she said. I have to disclose this. The buyers are going to find out there was a critical finding the night before the walkthrough, and that's going to raise questions about what else I might not have been maintaining. I know, I said. You cost me a lot of money tonight, I know that too. She looked at me for a long time. No, she said finally. The crack cost me the money. You just found it. That was the first thing she said that told me who she actually was underneath the blazer. There's a postscript to that night, and it matters more to me than the night itself. Gerald Park filed his recommendation the next morning. The Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry issued an emergency protocol notice within 10 days. Every licensed inspector servicing Koenig 9 series units in the state was required to perform an inner bearing face examination of the lower guide rail sections within 60 days and document the findings. If anomalies were present, the unit came out of service. If not, the inner face exam was added to the annual protocol going forward. They found cracking on 3 other units in the state. All 3 were in buildings with documented hydraulic fluid maintenance lapses. All 3 were running. All 3 had been inspected under the prior protocol, which didn't direct anyone to look at the inner face, and passed. I think about those 3 units more than I think about the Aldertons. Ours had me by accident on a Tuesday night, because Stuart made a phone call. The other 3 had nobody. What stood between them and a catastrophic safety failure was a paragraph in an emergency notice that existed, because a 29-year-old had filed a comment in a protocol revision record that nobody read for 7 years. You do the right thing and lose your standing for it, and you spend years telling yourself it probably didn't matter. And then one night it matters for people you've never met in buildings you've never been in. I don't have a clean way to say what that did to me. I just know I needed to find out. Now, I told you this isn't a fairy tale. It isn't. The deal didn't close. Not on schedule, anyway. Renata told me later that the lead buyer, a man named Pruitt, used the elevator situation as leverage to renegotiate the price significantly downward, which she accepted because after 8 months the alternative was worse. That happens. Life doesn't reward the person who said no with a parade. What Renata did instead was something that took her a few weeks, and which she did methodically, not dramatically, because that's who she is. She called me to her office, a real office, one of those downtown suites with the kind of quiet that costs money. And she made me an offer, not a number, a structure. She wanted a retainer agreement, all 11 of her properties, exclusive inspection and maintenance oversight, with a clause I hadn't seen before in any contract she'd handed across her desk. I know because she told me she'd written it herself, with her attorney, specifically for this situation. The clause said, "The inspector's professional judgment is not subject to override by property management, ownership, or transaction timelines. If the inspector issues an out-of-service finding, the finding stands until cleared by the inspector or a state authority. No penalty, no early termination, no financial consequence to the inspector for any safety finding, regardless of business impact. I've had maintenance contractors for 15 years, she said, and every one of them has been, in some way, subject to the pressure of whether I was happy with the answer they gave me. I didn't always know that's what I was creating. After Tuesday night, I know. She slid the contract across the desk. I'd like to have one contractor whose job it is to tell me the truth and who can't be bought or pressured out of it. You've already demonstrated you're that person. Twice, actually, once 7 years ago when it cost you, and once Tuesday when I tried. I read the whole thing. The rate is triple your current standard, she said. I checked what you charge, so I know what I'm tripling. Why triple? I said. Because the value of an inspection that can't be influenced is not the same as the value of an inspection that can be. I want to pay for the real thing. She paused. And because I can afford it, and you've been charging too little for too long. I negotiated 2 things. The first was that she'd also implement a maintenance log audit across all 11 properties. I wanted to see the actual service history on every hydraulic unit in her portfolio before I signed off on any of them. The second was that any critical finding I issued had to go to her directly, not through building managers, not through her property management company. She got to hear it from me first every time. She agreed to both. I got home late the night we signed. Lily was at the kitchen table and the index cards were gone. How'd the project go? I asked. She held up her phone with a photo of it on the display board. I got an A-, she said. Miss Turano said the thread was the strongest part. The thread? I said. The thing underneath. She said I found the thing that connected all the events and most kids just do a list. She said mine actually held together. I sat down across from her. You know why it held, she said, in the explaining voice she gets. Because I didn't start with the cards. I started with what was pulling. What was pulling, I said. She grinned and went back to whatever she was doing on her tablet. Something for math, I think. There was graph paper involved, and I sat there in my kitchen, and I thought about a crack on the inner face of a guide rail in the pit of a building I almost didn't go to, in the section nobody's protocol told them to look at, where all the loading concentrates. And I thought about a 29-year-old in a conference room losing an argument and going home and writing a comment in a document, and thinking it would never matter to anyone. I make a decent living now. Not a great one, but decent, and more stable than it's been. There is a version of Tuesday night where I take what Renata offered me in the machine room, and somewhere there's a version of me who did that, and I don't know if that version sleeps. I know I do. I picked the job. I picked the log entry and the lockout tag and the no. I'd pick it again. So here's what I want to know before you go. Because I'm asking for real and I read every comment. Have you ever been in the room where the truth was inconvenient and you said it anyway? Where you wrote the thing down or made the call or refused to sign off, and it cost you something? Did it ever come back around? Or are you still waiting to find out if it mattered? Tell me. I'd really like to know. And if this one meant something to you, hit the like button and leave a word below. It's how the next person finds this. Subscribe, because the next story I'm going to tell is one I've held on to for a long time, and I think it's time.